Hey AP Euro folks, as we headed towards our exam next week, I thought it'd be helpful to go back and take a look at the new monarchs. The new monarchs are associated with the period between 1450 and 1550. Prior to 1450, during what we'd probably still call the Middle Ages or maybe the early modern age, we're dealing with monarchs who had very little power. They were always beholden to the nobles who controlled military might. They had very little taxation power, and the church managed to capitalize a whole lot of their control of the country. What we moved to in the period between 1450 and 1550 is a new phenomenon. Monarchs who are able to distance themselves from other nobles who might have rival claims to the throne and begin to establish solid regimes around themselves. So, for instance, a new monarch is certainly going to try and keep other nobles away from power as much as possible. They're going to assure that no nobles, for instance, are on their councils. And at the same time, they're going to try to bring in as much talent and motivation as possible, and that means the middle class. The middle class are the darlings of the new monarchs. We're going to promote business. We're going to keep taxes on businesses low, which would have made middle class people very happy, and we're going to try to avoid warfare as well, because warfare generally rips business and assures that the country isn't prosperous. While doing all of these things, we're going to tax land, and land is something that generally would have been in the hands of more noble powers. So we're going to use the taxes that we place on those nobles' lands in order to build our own army. Now, these wouldn't be standing armies in the sense that the army would be constantly on call, but having a large treasury that you could then spend on an army was something the new monarchs were able to do quite frequently. We look at examples like Henry VII in England, who calmed down tensions after the War of the Roses, took on more lands, married where he had to in order to assure that succession in family brought him extra lands within the realm. He used the court of the Star Chamber to intimidate nobles, and he also pledged not to have any wars and used diplomacy where he could to keep the middle class happy. We see the same sort of thing with Louis XI, the Spider King in France, who assured that France had better business practices. He controlled the power of his church, and at the same time he was pretty unscrupulous about stealing lands where he could around France to push the borders of the country as far as possible. Probably the best known new monarchs are Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain. Their policies aimed towards one religion, Catholicism. They pushed the Jews and the Muslims out of Spain, ensuring that there would be only one Catholic faith. They also controlled deadly force. They pushed through a number of middle-class people into their councils and kept the nobles at bay. So, remember, always, the new monarchs are going to keep the nobles as far as possible away from them and keep the middle class as close as possible. That makes more money, and that makes more power. Have a good night.